If you live anywhere near fire country, you have been told about defensible space approximately 900 times. Clear the brush. Limb the trees. 100 feet of clearance. And that's all correct, and I'm not here to argue with any of it. This video is about the other things. The ones that don't make the pamphlet, that I have either learned the hard way or watched somebody else learn the hard way, and that mostly cost nothing but an afternoon. Subscribe if this is your part of the world. I spend fire season out here every year, and I think about this more than is probably healthy. I'll say up front, your local fire authority knows your specific ground better than I do. And if they tell you something different than I do, listen to them. And if there's an evacuation order for where you are, that order beats everything in this video. Nothing here is worth arguing with. All right, here's the thing that reorganizes everything else, and it's the single most undertold fact in this whole subject. Your house probably will not burn because a wall of flame arrives at it. That's the picture everybody has. A front of fire coming up the hill, and either it reaches you or it doesn't. But that's not how most homes are lost. Most homes are lost to embers, burning bits of bark and needle and debris, lifted by the fire's own wind and carried out ahead of it, a mile ahead. Sometimes more. The research on this is not ambiguous. Post-fire investigations going back years, and controlled testing where they shower embers onto real structures in a lab keep landing on the same figure. Something on the order of 90% of home losses involve ember ignition rather than direct flame. And they don't burn the house down on contact. An ember is a small thing. It lands, and it needs something small and dry to catch on. If it finds that, you get a little fire, and that little fire has an hour or more to work while nobody's watching, because the flame front is still a mile away and there's nothing dramatic happening yet. That's how houses are lost, from the inside out, from a small, unglamorous place, quietly ahead of the fire. And it isn't one ember. That's the part that's hard to picture until you've seen it. When conditions are right, it's more like weather. Thousands of them coming across on the wind at once, for anywhere from 15 minutes to hours, hitting every surface of the building from every angle, including sideways and underneath. So this isn't a question of whether one lucky coal finds one unlucky spot. Everything on your house gets tested at the same time. And the whole thing comes down to whether there's a single place on the property where a coal can land and find a meal. It only takes one that works. Which also means the fix is unglamorous in exactly the same proportion. There's no single big-ticket purchase that solves it. It's a list of small things. And the list is mostly free. So the most useful thing you will ever do for your house is go outside and look at it the way an ember would. That's the exercise. Not clearing brush, you already know about clearing brush. This is different. Walk all the way around your house slowly, and at every point ask one question if a glowing coal the size of a pea landed right here on a windy afternoon in August. Would it find anything to eat? Do it with a ladder. Get up where you don't normally go. Start with the gutters, because gutters are the classic. A gutter full of fir needles is a trough of perfect kindling running along the edge of your roof, directly under your eave, which is directly under your attic. That's not a metaphor. That's a fuse. Clean them, and if you're going to buy one thing, buy metal gutter guards, not plastic, metal. Then look at the roof itself. Not the shingles, the corners. The valleys where two roof planes meet, where needles collect and mat down, behind the chimney, around any roof penetration. And if you've got solar panels, look under them. Because the gap between panel and roof is a beautiful sheltered place for debris to pile up where you'll never see it from the ground. I've been up on mine and found a mat of needles 4 inches thick under a panel that looked perfectly clean from the driveway. Now the vents. And this is the one I want you to actually do something about, because it's the highest value thing in this video. Every vent on your house is a hole into your house. Attic vents, gable vents, crawl space vents, soffit vents, dryer vent. An ember that gets through one of those lands in your attic insulation or your crawl space in a dark place and starts working. And most vents are screened with 1/4-inch mesh, which was chosen to keep out mice, not embers. 1/4-inch will pass an ember all day long. What you want is 16th-inch corrosion-resistant metal mesh. Stainless is best. That's fine enough to stop embers and still coarse enough to let the air through. And that matters, because your attic needs to breathe, or you'll trade a fire problem for a moisture problem. You can retrofit that mesh onto existing vents for very little money and an afternoon of work. There are also purpose-built ember-resistant vents, including ones with a coating that expands and seals the whole opening at around 450 degrees, which are tested to real standards. Those cost more. The mesh is the cheap version, and it's a large fraction of the benefit. The thing to understand is that this is all or nothing per opening. A house with every vent screened except one forgotten gable vent up under the peak has an unscreened house. Embers will find the one you missed. They're not clever. There are just an enormous number of them. So count them. Actually count. Walk the outside of the building and write down every opening you can find. Then walk the inside of the crawl space and the attic and see whether the count matches. Because there is almost always one you can't see from the ground. Behind a dormer, up under a soffit return, tucked into the backside of the roof where you never go. Then, check the dryer vent while you're at it, since a lot of those have a flap that hasn't closed properly in years and a duct full of lint behind it, which is a hazard on a perfectly ordinary day. Now get down on your knees and look under things. Under the deck. This is a big one, and almost nobody looks. The space under a deck collects leaves and needles for years. And it's sheltered. And it's dry. And it's directly beneath a wooden structure attached to your house. Embers blow in sideways under there and land in a pile of the best tinder on the property. Clean it out, and if you can, screen the perimeter of the deck skirt with that same fine mesh. And look at the deck surface itself while you're there, specifically the gaps between the boards, which collect needles and hold them upright where an ember dropping straight down will find them. A shop vac or a putty knife along the seams does more good than sweeping does. Under the stairs. Behind the propane tank, in the corner between the shed and the fence where nothing's been moved in 6 years. Around the base of the outbuildings, too. A shed that goes up 30 feet from the house is a fire 30 feet from the house, and your propane tank wants clear ground around it, whether there's a wildfire coming or not. And then look at what's actually touching your house, which brings me to the part that surprises people most. There's a concept called Zone Zero, the first 5 feet out from your walls. And the counterintuitive thing about it is that this 5 feet matters more than the 95 feet beyond it. People will spend a whole weekend limbing trees at the property line and then walk back to a house with bark mulch banked up against the siding, a stack of firewood under the kitchen window, and a doormat on the porch. In those first 5 feet, you want nothing that will burn. Gravel, pavers, bare mineral soil, concrete, no bark mulch. Bark mulch is a fuel, and it's a fuel that holds an ember and smolders for a long time before it flames, which is exactly the worst behavior. It'll sit there working quietly for an hour with nothing to see, and then come up as flame against your siding long after you'd have said the danger had passed. No firewood against the wall, move it out past 30 feet. No plants touching the siding, no plants under vents or windows. Patio cushions and plastic furniture, move them off the deck and away. The garbage cans, the recycling, the boat, the ARV, all of that is fuel, and all of it is usually parked right up against the house. And the doormat. I know how that sounds. But a coir doormat against a door, under an eave, out of the rain, is dry, fibrous material sitting directly on a threshold, and doormats show up on the list of ignition points in real post-fire surveys often enough that people who study this mention them by name. When you leave, bring it inside. It costs you 4 seconds. Fencing is the one people never think of. A wood fence that attaches directly to your house is a fuse running from your property line straight to your siding. If you replace nothing else, replace the last few feet where the fence meets the building with something that won't burn. While you're walking, look at your windows too. Glass is often the first part of a wall to fail under sustained heat. And once a window goes, you've got an opening straight into the living room with curtains hanging next to it. Single pane is the weak version. Double pane with one tempered layer holds up substantially better. That's not an afternoon job, and it's not cheap, so I'd put it well behind the vents and the gutters on the list. But if you're replacing windows anyway for some other reason, that's the moment to spend the extra. And here's one that almost nobody says out loud, because it's awkward. Your house's odds depend partly on your neighbor's house. Once one structure is burning, it becomes a large, sustained heat source and an ember factory of its own, and it works on everything near it. In the fires where whole neighborhoods went, a lot of the spread after the first few minutes was building to building rather than brush to building. So if you've got a neighbor within a couple 100 feet, their gutters are partly your problem. I'm not telling you to go knock on a door and criticize somebody's housekeeping. But if there's a version of this where you offer to help, or you just mention what you learned and let them do what they want with it, that's worth more than another weekend on your own place. I've talked about all of this before in the context of the container out here, closing it up before I leave for the season. Keeping the leaves off the top, keeping the ground clear underneath it. The reason I go through that every summer isn't the flame front. It's that I'm not there to catch a small fire in its first hour. I'm curious what's in your first 5 feet right now. Go look and come tell me in the comments what you found, because I'd bet almost everybody finds at least one thing, and I'd bet a lot of you find the firewood. Now let me get to the 2 that people find out at the worst possible time. First one, the power will be off. When a wildfire situation develops, electricity goes early. Sometimes the lines come down. Sometimes the utility cuts it deliberately as a precaution, because high wind and live wire is how a lot of these things start in the first place, and those shutoffs can last a day or 3. Either way, assume the power is gone before the fire gets anywhere near you. If you're on a well, and your well is an electric submersible pump, which it almost certainly is, then no power means no water. Not low pressure. None, you get whatever's in your pressure tank, which is a few dozen gallons, and then you're done. Your taps don't work. Your toilets don't work. And the garden hose you were planning to stand on the roof with does not work. I want to be blunt, because there are a lot of videos out there showing a man on a roof with a hose. Do not build your plan around that. Even if you have water and pressure, a garden hose is not a defense against a wildfire. And the moment you decide to stay and hold the line with one, you have become a person who cannot leave. The realistic value of water is in pre-wetting things and in dealing with small ember ignitions, not in fighting fire. If you want to actually have water, there are 2 honest answers, and both of them get built long before fire season. One is storage up high, a tank uphill from your buildings that gravity feeds without any power at all. The other is an engine-driven pump, gas or diesel, that doesn't care what the grid is doing, drawing from a tank or a pond. And whatever you build, fill it up when the red flag warning goes out. not after. Fill jugs, fill the bathtub, fill everything. That's a 15-minute job that you'll be glad of for 3 days. And if your answer to all this is a generator, check the actual numbers before fire season rather than during it. A deep well submersible is often 240 volt and it draws a hard surge on startup, several times its running draw, and a lot of the portable generators people have sitting in the shed won't start one even though the running wattage looks fine on paper. Find out now, with a hose in your hand and a calm afternoon, whether your generator actually runs your pump. Also find out how you're connecting it, because backfeeding a panel through a dryer outlet is how people electrocute linemen. And check your fuel. Gasoline more than a few months old with no stabilizer in it is not going to do what you want on the one day it matters. Second one, and it's the hardest thing in this video to say plainly. The single most protective decision available to you is to leave early. Earlier than feels reasonable. Earlier than the neighbors. Nobody tells you this because it doesn't feel like preparation, it feels like giving up. But the danger in these events is disproportionately about being caught in the open, on a road, in smoke, in traffic, with fire on both sides. People die in their cars. They die on the one road out, in a line of cars that stopped moving. And almost all of them left when it seemed clearly necessary to leave, which was later than it should have been. So, no two ways out, going in different directions, and actually drive both of them so you know what they look like. One road can be cut in a few minutes, and if that's your only road you don't have a plan, you have a hope. During fire season, keep the vehicle above half a tank. The pumps in town don't run without power either. Park it facing out, and park it out of the garage, because a garage door with no power is a heavy thing to argue with. Keep the go bags near the door, not in the back of a closet. And on the bags, pack them for smoke and for 3 days, not for a vacation. Cotton or wool clothing rather than synthetic, long sleeves and long pants, boots, gloves, and something to cover your face, an N95 does more for you than a bandana. Prescription glasses if you wear contacts, because contacts and smoke are a miserable combination. Medications, and not just the current bottle, but a written list of what they are and the doses. Because refilling something in an unfamiliar pharmacy without that list is its own ordeal. And cash. Card readers need power and a network too, and both of those are gone in the same moment everything else is. And decide your trigger now, while nothing is happening and you're thinking clearly. Not when it gets bad. Something specific. When there's a fire within some number of miles and the wind is coming my way, we go. Write it down. Because in the moment, with smoke in the air and adrenaline running, everybody's judgment slides towards staying a little longer, and the trigger you set in April is smarter than the one you'll make up in September. If you've got animals, move your trigger substantially earlier, and I mean hours, not minutes. Loading livestock is slow at the best of times, and animals read your stress and the smoke and get harder to handle exactly when you need them easy. Horses that load fine every other day of the year will refuse in that situation. So know where they're going before the day comes. Have the trailer hooked and pointed out during fire season rather than parked behind something, and get halters where you can reach them in the dark. And for the cats and dogs, have the carriers out and accessible. Because a lot of the time, the animal that gets left is the one that hid under the bed while everybody was busy. One more on getting out. Don't count on your phone. Cell towers go down with the power or burn, and the network gets swamped anyway. Have a battery or crank radio so you can hear the local station, know which frequency it is before you need it, and sign up for your county's emergency alert system now. Most of them are opt-in, and most people have never done it. Then agree on an out-of-area person that everybody in the family calls or texts to check in with. Because it's often easier to reach somebody 3 states away than somebody 3 miles away. Now the last one, and it's the least dramatic, and I'd argue it's the most undertold thing in this entire subject. Take a video of everything you own. Right now. This week. Walk through your house with your phone recording. Open every drawer, every closet, every cupboard. Narrate it, say what things are, say what you paid, say when you got it. Go out to the shop and do the tools. Do the saws individually. Get the serial numbers on anything that has one. Then get that video somewhere off your property, in the cloud or on a drive at somebody else's house. Here's why, and this is the part nobody explains. If you lose a house, the insurance claim is not a form that says one house. It is a list. A room-by-room, item-by-item list of your possessions and what they were worth, and you are the one who has to produce it, from memory, in the worst month of your life, from a motel room. People routinely lose thousands of dollars simply because they cannot remember what they owned. Nobody can. You can't inventory your own kitchen from memory right now, sitting there comfortably, let alone after. Same for documents, deeds, policies, birth certificates, titles, the actual policy declarations page with your coverage limits on it. Scan them and put them in the cloud. It's an hour of tedium, and it is the difference between a hard year and a much harder one. And while you're looking at that declarations page, actually read the number. This is a separate piece of advice, and it's the one I'd guess the fewest people have done. Check whether your coverage limit still resembles what it would cost to rebuild your house today. Building costs have moved a lot, and an awful lot of policies are sitting at a number that made sense when the policy was written and doesn't anymore. Finding that out from your agent in the spring is a conversation. Finding it out from an adjuster after a fire is not a conversation. It's just an amount. And while you're at it, take pictures of the outside of the house and the landscape too, from several angles. Those turn out to matter more than you'd think. Then there's the last thing, which isn't practical advice exactly. Decide in advance what actually leaves with you. Because if you don't, you'll decide it at 2 a.m. with a deputy at the end of the driveway, and that is a terrible time to be making a values assessment about photo albums. Walt kept a list on the inside of a cupboard door, 5 or 6 things, in order, in pencil. I thought it was morbid when I was a kid. It isn't morbid, it's the opposite. He'd already had that argument with himself once, in daylight, on a calm day, so that if the day ever came he could just read the list and load the truck and go. And spend his attention on getting everybody out instead of standing in the living room trying to decide what his life amounted to. The list on the cupboard door is the whole idea of this video. Really, every one of these things is a decision you make now, cheap and calm, so that later you don't have to make it expensive and frightened. None of this makes a house fireproof. There's no such thing, and anybody selling you that is selling you something. But an awful lot of homes are lost to a pea-sized coal in a gutter, and that one you can actually do something about on a Saturday. Go call your local district and ask them what they'd want you to do first out here. They'll tell you, and they'll know your ground. I'll put a couple videos up here in the meantime. I'm Cole Ashford. Thank you for listening.